Picture this. You've planned your dream cruise for months, packed your bags, and finally made it to the port, only to be told you can't board. It happens more often than you'd think. Every cruise has a strict final check-in time, usually about an hour before departure, and if you miss it even by just a few minutes, the ship will leave without you. A group of 10 passengers recently learned this the hard way when their flight was delayed, and they arrived just 30 minutes before departure. Unfortunately, check-in had already closed, and they had to watch from the dock as their ship sailed away. The best way to avoid this nightmare? Arrive at the port at least 3 to 4 hours before departure to give yourself plenty of time for unexpected delays. Don't let a tight schedule ruin your vacation before it even begins. Number 2, not meeting dress code requirements. Believe it or not, what you wear could get you denied boarding or even kicked off the ship. While most cruises have a relaxed dress code during the day, some luxury cruise lines and certain theme nights require formal attire, and if you don't follow the rules, you might not be allowed into dining areas or special events. Even more importantly, some cruise lines have strict policies against offensive clothing, like shirts with inappropriate language, political statements, or controversial images. In rare cases, passengers have been removed from ships for refusing to follow dress codes. Before you pack, check your cruise line's dress code policy, especially for formal nights and specialty restaurants. The last thing you want is to be turned away from dinner, or worse, from the entire cruise, because of what you're wearing. Number 3, wrong documents, passport and ID issues. Imagine getting all the way to the cruise terminal, suitcase in hand, only to be told you don't have the right documents and can't board. It happens more often than you think. While some U.S.-based cruises allow citizens to sail with just a birth certificate and a government-issued photo ID, a passport is always the safest choice. Many countries require that your passport be valid for at least 6 months after your cruise ends, and some even require extra blank pages for visas. One couple was recently denied boarding because their passport had been extended past the original 10-year limit, a rule they had no idea about. To avoid a last-minute disaster, double-check your passport, ID, and visa requirements well before your trip. A simple mistake could mean missing your cruise and losing all your money. Number 4, bringing prohibited items. Not everything in your suitcase is welcome on a cruise, and packing the wrong items could get you denied boarding. Most cruise lines ban things like irons, drones, weapons, even toy ones, and outside alcohol, but some restrictions might surprise you. One woman was banned for life from Carnival Cruise Lines just for bringing CBD gummies, which are legal in her home state but not allowed on the ship. If security finds a prohibited item in your bag, they might confiscate it, deny you boarding, or even ban you from future cruises. To avoid ruining your vacation before it even starts, check your cruise line's restricted items list before you pack, because one small mistake could cost you your entire trip. Number 5, showing signs of illness, especially COVID-19. Feeling a little under the weather? If you show up to check in with a fever, coughing, or other signs of illness, you might be denied boarding. Cruise lines take health and safety seriously, especially after COVID-19, and many have strict policies about sick passengers. For example, Norwegian Cruise Line states that guests who test positive for COVID-19, or even those who have been in close contact with someone who has, are unlikely to be allowed to board. Some cruise lines will have a medical team check you at the terminal, while others have a zero-tolerance policy for any signs of illness. To avoid being turned away, monitor your health before departure, follow your cruise line's guidelines, and be honest about any symptoms, because getting caught trying to hide an illness could get you banned from future cruises too. Number 6, missing visas. You've got your passport, your bags are packed, and you're ready to set sail, but then you get stopped at check-in because you don't have the right visa. It happens more often than you'd expect. Some countries require special visas, even if you're just stopping at a port for a few hours. One family was denied boarding in Seattle for their Alaska cruise because they had a U.S. visa but forgot to get a Canadian visa for the final stop in Vancouver. The worst part? They didn't get a refund. Cruise rules change often, and the European Union is even adding a new visa requirement for non-EU travelers soon. Before you travel, check if you need a visa for any of your stops. Don't assume your passport is enough. A little research now can save you from a big headache later. Number 7. Traveling with young children. Cruising with a baby sounds like a great idea, until you get to the port and find out your child is too young to sail. Most cruise lines won't allow infants under 6 months old on board, and for longer or more remote cruises, like transatlantic or world cruises, the minimum age is often 12 months. But that's not the only rule parents need to know. If you're traveling with a child who isn't your own, like a grandchild, niece, or nephew, you must have a notarized permission letter from their legal guardian. Without it, you'll be denied boarding. The same goes for parents and kids with different last names. You'll need official documents to prove the relationship. To avoid heartbreak at check-in, check your cruise line's age and document requirements well. Number 8. Being drunk or disruptive at check-in. Cruise vacations are all about relaxing and having fun, but if you show up to check-in drunk or causing trouble, you might not make it on board at all. Cruise lines have the right to deny boarding to anyone who is heavily intoxicated, acting aggressively, or being disruptive at the terminal. In fact, P&O Cruises recently updated their policy, specifically warning that passengers who appear too drunk may not be allowed on the ship. If security or staff feel you're a risk to other guests or crew, they won't hesitate to turn you away, with no refund. The lesson here? Save the celebration for after you board and keep things calm at check-in, or you might end up watching your ship sail away without you. Number 9. Pregnancy restrictions. If you're pregnant and planning a cruise, be sure to check the rules before you book, because if you're too far along, you won't be allowed to board. Most cruise lines have strict policies that ban passengers who will be 24 weeks or more pregnant at any point during the trip. Even if you're earlier in your pregnancy, some lines require a doctor's note confirming you're healthy enough to travel. A woman in Australia recently showed up for her Carnival cruise, only to be denied boarding at check-in because she was 26 weeks pregnant, and she lost all her money. Cruise ships don't have full medical facilities for pregnancy complications, which is why these rules exist. If you're expecting, double-check your cruise line's policy and bring any required paperwork to make sure you don't get turned away at the port. Number 10. No required travel insurance. Most people think of travel insurance as an optional add-on, but for some cruises it's actually required, and not having the right coverage could get you denied boarding. Certain cruise lines like Cunard require proof of travel insurance before they let you on the ship, especially for passengers booking from the UK. Policy must cover medical emergencies, trip cancellations, and even emergency evacuation in case something goes wrong. Expedition cruises to remote places like Antarctica also have strict insurance rules. Imagine getting to the terminal, excited for your trip, only to be turned away because you didn't read the fine print. To avoid this, always check if your cruise line requires insurance, and if they do, make sure your policy meets their exact requirements. It's a small step that can save you from a huge disappointment.